Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope you have had a wonderful week thus far, and I aim to now make it better. I have for you a very good Game Week 5 preview, which includes captaincy, the forwards, those two are topics which are incredibly important to this week, and a few of my theories on players and also the landscape in general. If you could consider subscribing, so many of you that watch regularly aren't subscribed, as up to 70% of you. So if you could get that number down to 68, 69%, I would be very, very grateful. It just takes a second. As you can see, my team is on screen. I've had a flying start, courtesy of my analysis, but also a lot of luck. If you would like to cash in on that luck as well, please do consider subscribing. And without anything else needing to be said, let's get into the video. I will start by talking about what I deem to be the most important topic this week. That is captaincy. Why is that? Well, there's not a standout option. I think by far this is the hardest week we've had in terms of captaincy. I think 2, 3, and 4 comfortably Haaland, and then 1 if you own Salah, Ipswich away. You should have just gone there, really, right? But yeah, I would say this by a mile is the most difficult. All of the 4 options on screen are the ones that I believe to be the best, but they all have their negatives attached to them. So we're going to discuss them in depth and then come to a conclusion on what I think is the best one. Now, just as a prerequisite, with regards to Watkins, it is assuming he gets around 70 minutes. I know he came off against Young Boys in the Champions League and had a nice back on his foot. I do just think that he said he's had a few niggles, he's not been at 100%, and he's had a few things that he's struggling with. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a continuation of that or that this was just a really small thing he picked up in the game. However, this is on the assumption that he's going to play about 70 minutes. Let's start with Haaland. Originally, I was so much more bullish on Haaland until I watched the Spurs Arsenal game. Now, they missed Declan Rice, and that is a huge deal because a midfield in a very athletic era of football of Jorginho and Partey, well, that is not particularly athletic. But they still limited Spurs very, very well to honestly 0 big chances. Now, a huge deal of that was Raya's calmness, composure, but also presence at the back, alongside the brilliance of Gabriel and Saliba, and then the rest of the defensive unit. I mean, Timber and White were brilliant, especially Timber in his dueling capacity was fantastic, right? And then you had Havertz up top that did so much, etc., right? But still was a huge loss. So with Rice coming back into that, you see how difficult they are going to be to break down. And honestly, I'm not sure City do break them down too much. Yes, they have a brilliant set of players. They have brilliant attacking dynamics. I mean, whether it be De Bruyne interacting with Grealish in those wide left spaces or the left half spaces, you've got Haaland up top to occupy the zones, but also running behind. I think there'll be less of that because I think Arsenal set up fairly deep like they did against Spurs. You've got Savio's 1v1 threat on the right. You've got whoever occupies that right half space, maybe De Bruyne shuttles across at times, and then you've got Bernardo Silva as well. You've got the ball circulation of Rodri behind to keep the pressure up. So you've got so much going on there that is so good. And then you've got maybe Foden's ball striking off. But again, I think with how solid Arsenal are showing themselves to be, not only just against Spurs, but even last season, their defense should be heavily respected. And it's not like Haaland's just going to be able to maybe score some of the type of goals that he has in the other games. There's been a wide variety, right? But how often is he going to get the opportunity to, for example, pivot like he did against Brentford? Are the Arsenal centre-backs going to allow him that time and space? Will he be able to pick that up, find that for himself? I think not. Is he going to be able to run in behind like he did against West Ham for his hat-trick? Again, I think not, because Arsenal's line will be deeper. And also the recovery pace of both Saliba and Gabriel is significantly better than, and the strength than that of, let's say, Kilman. So with that in mind, I think his route to goals will certainly be more limited. Even De Bruyne's crosses in from like those central/wide-ish areas, well, they become probably a lesser occurrence because they know that Gabriel and Saliba will always be so well stationed, but also just actually winning the header in the first place will become difficult. But all of those type of goals, I think, in general, will be more difficult to score. I think Arsenal make it very difficult for City. I do now see this becoming a bit more cagey, and City have to account for Arsenal's huge transition threat, especially now with Rice being back. So with all that being said, personally, for me, I wouldn't be going here. I do genuinely think this is a game that Haaland could blank, and especially when you get the upside of the fact that other people are going to captain him regardless because of how he's been playing. I really think that this is a week now to pivot off Haaland. Now, analysing Bournemouth away from home is a little bit awkward because I wouldn't say they're an up and down team. They just have irregularities in their performances away from home. So it is difficult to deduce exactly what I'm going to get, especially for the wider players. I think for the central player, for the Jota, for the Nunez, it's easier to deduce that you'll get that space in behind. You'll find yourself receiving the ball in really nice areas. Isak, for example, away at Bournemouth, should have been playing the ball should have had the ball played a lot more into him, but Newcastle maybe lack the quality / plays in the right positions to be able to do that. Liverpool will have this less so, even if it's McAllister who goes slightly advanced. Maybe Szoboszlai's passing from the central areas improves. And if it does, it was poor against Nottingham Forest, but if he does have a good game, then he'll be released. I mean, maybe they go wide to Salah and his 1v1 creativity allows the release of the 9 often. So all of those routes to getting the 9 in behind, on top of the fact that there's space in there in the first place, right, with the high line, with the Bournemouth high press, means that I think that Bournemouth will concede chances. It's just whether it's Salah who's the one who profits of that. And I'm going to lean on the side of yes. I say positioning is everything, because if he is to be so wide like he was against Forest, albeit it's a different system, hence why I don't think he will, well then his likelihood of output reduces significantly because he's not getting that many threatening actions. And therefore, you really need him to produce on those, and you can't expect him to do that every single game, right? However, against Bournemouth, I do think he'll be able to find himself in those half spaces more. I think Bournemouth will give it far more of a go than Forest. And as a result, whilst it's close, I am still leaning to the fact that he is probably the best captaincy option as of now. But I think it's very, very close for the reasons we will discuss when we come on to Watkins and Eze and why I like them. Okay, so if Ollie Watkins had 90 minutes, I'm quite confident I'd have him maybe even above Salah, if not on par. It's just the fact that his fitness in terms of injury still doesn't seem to be there. So I think he'll have about 70, and the fact that John Duran is really trying to break down that door. Now, Wolves have had a problem all season with dealing with the opposition strikers. They didn't have that so much against Newcastle, but Isak did go off, so I'm going to slightly discount that. And the fact that they were at home and now they'll be away. But Jackson got a lot of change out of that Wolves system. Chris Wood got a lot of change out of that Wolves system. And in game week 1, Kai Havertz definitely did to an extent as well. So with that in mind, is Watkins well suited to exploit that? Well, yes, because given the Wolves' game model, you're always going to have some space in behind, and you're going to be able to turn over the ball in transition a lot in those central areas and release your 9. And I think with the midfield, or maybe even like 4-2-2 that Villa have, with Rodgers and Onana specifically, and Ramsey as well, like really intense, physically robust, dual heavy to an extent when it comes to an Onana. I just think they'll have a lot of turnovers and quick releases into Watkins. As a result, he looks good. To me, he looked good. Like when I watched the game against Everton, I was like, okay, he's occupying those zonal spaces really nicely, and he's not making as many channel runs. He did that a lot under Steven Gerrard, where he would make these channel runs to make spaces for other people to drag centre-backs out of position. But I remember specifically hearing something about how Unai Emery wants him closer into that central area and just in and around the box. And as a result, I think with him being so well stationed, on top of his quality, on top of his Villa's quality, on top of the game model that Wolves employ, he's going to get chances, right? So for me, it is a risk with his minutes, assuming that they're not that good, but there is certainly some upside there. Now, this is what I would describe as a slightly rogue captaincy, but it's not for the sake of being different. It's because I genuinely do think that there's upside to be had here. Firstly and foremost, Eze not returning in the game against Palace, the game against West Ham, the game against Leicester, and the game against Brentford in game week 1. I'm actually going to keep that in there so you can see some of the raw, unedited footage. Well, him not returning is very, very unlucky, I would say. I mean, he has had so many instances where he could have. So many times he's found himself in the right position. Again, coming back to my point. And so many times that actions he's executed have been either just marginally off, always been let down by other teammates. And I think the returns are somewhat of an inevitability, and they will be coming. Now, I would watch a decent amount of Man United footage before I recorded this because I wanted to make sure that there was actually something to exploit. Ten Hag's system actually isn't that bad. It just requires a very, very, very good player in pretty much every position because it leaves you isolated a lot. You can't be bailed out by your teammates as easily, whether that be the fullbacks or the pivot in particular, or like the 6/8, whatever you want to call it, dependent on how you view the system. Like Kobe and Eriksson/Casemiro and the fullbacks, they all get isolated quite a bit. So with that 1v1 threat down the line, I think the wingbacks will certainly find some joy, even if they aren't the ones taking them on, maybe just like a few passes and being released in behind. And then Eze in those central areas, similar to how Szoboszlai fed Salah for that third goal, just profiting in those type of areas. I do think that Eze could have a good day, on top of the fact of what I've already said, that I'm still very, very impressed with him. There's just enough space in those central areas, which Eze is constantly occupying to turn the ball over and then exploit. But for me, I do think, especially at home, under the lights, Selhurst Park, it'll be bouncing. he'll definitely want to get in on the act, and Palace have another good start. I think these type of narratives feed in to an extent, and I am expectant of him to do somewhat well at least. But I can't be surprised if he gets a goal and an assist. This is not actually that much. It's just one good strike and one good pass. And I definitely think against a United side who have conceded enough chances in a wide variety of areas, both centrally and in the wide areas, mainly because of how isolated they leave their players, and normally goes from actually in to out. So I wouldn't be surprised if the split strikers profit with Eze feeding them. But I do think there is some basis for an Eze cap. Now, I am quite adamant on sticking with 3-4-3 for the foreseeable future. I think with changing the bonus structure and the pricing points just in general, there is so much profit to be made out of the forwards, and thus they really do deserve their own time, especially in a week where it's not exactly clear on what we should be doing. I'm just going to go through all of them quickly. Vardy, I really like the fixtures. Obviously, he's got Arsenal in 6, but that aside, they're good. He looks sharp. I mean, he's back at 90 minutes. He's on penalties. He is always going to be the one on end the chances pretty much, or at least he'll be in and around there. And I think his floor is very good as a result over like the medium term, just with any set of fixtures. So if you did want someone who maybe isn't able to access the higher ends of most players' ceiling, but a safe option, I would go here. It's a decent option. He is capable of accessing that higher ceiling, but I just think it's the volume of chances that Leicester are creating, combined with the fact that he's probably not the most ruthless finisher that he has been in the past, for that reason that he can't access that regularly, at least. And I just think it'll be somewhat unlikely he does that. João Pedro, I mean, the fixtures aren't great, but I did say that I think he could be the giant slayer. Within that Brighton side, I would say he's arguably the best finisher. And they are going to create a lot of chances. It's just the fact that who it falls to. For example, Welbeck, Minter, Matoma, they're not unbelievable finishers. And João Pedro, I would say, is a better one. So, assuming that he's fit, I don't mind keeping him as an option. However, with both of those, my issue may be Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because I really, really like the look of him. Now, I spoke about on Twitter how I wasn't particularly impressed by the way Konsa and Torres imposed themselves on Calvert-Lewin, but I also have to give Calvert-Lewin credit as to how much of a handful he looked, and not just physically, right, but like even running in behind. I don't mean just strength-wise. So even running in behind, he caused them a lot of problems. He was somewhat of a magnet as well. Like a lot went through him, and it kind of has to, right, when you have the setup that Everton do and the makeup of personnel. And he looks sharp. He really does look sharp. So with such a good run of fixtures coming, even like Palace and Newcastle at home in 6 and 7, that's fine. They're two defenses that don't look razor sharp at the moment, and it's at home. So I'm actually quite bullish on Calvert-Lewin. And out of all the cheap ones, he's my favorite. Chris Wood, I think, could be fantastic, set and forget. I mean, a one you really doesn't look in favor. So I imagine Wood minimum get 75, if not more. He's so good at occupying that central zone, similar to Havertz. He has so much coming into him. High volume of shots. Forest looked like one of the better sides in the league. So impressed with him so far. And I just think he's going to do well. So as a set and forget, I really like Chris Wood. Also, he's great on the bonus point system when he scores. Solanke is someone I actually think could be an option from game week 5, which is now. So what I noticed against Arsenal is physically fantastic. I mean, there was one time he, like early in the first half, he backed into Saliba, which Gary Neville spoke about just after I thought about it, and I was like, wow, okay, that is impressive. That level of physicality is impressive. So I do think against sides who aren't able to physically impose themselves through their centre backs, Solanke is going to profit. A number 9 in an system will always have a decent time of being on the end of chances as well, right? So you have the fundamentals. It's just whether Spurs can put the pieces together, because right now, creative-wise, they look poor. I mean, even against Newcastle with Son at 9, they should have been feeding him so much more. But having touchline wingers who, well, the profiles of their wingers aren't ones which really suit touchline wingers. Odegaard, sure, to an extent, but Son and Johnson, no, not really. And Kulusevski was playing in the middle, right? So with all that in mind, I think if they can fix their creative issues, Solanke can become a very good option. Maybe you wait 1 week, right? Because you want to see how that develops now that Solanke's back. Brentford do press relatively high. I imagine they'll do that even without Visser. And as such, he should have some opportunities similar to Haaland, but they are one of the better sides. So I'd probably wait till game week 6, see how he does. But he's certainly someone to consider, even if he's not getting too much praise at the moment. Havertz, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? Like, game week 5, I'm not saying it's a write-off at all. I actually do think he can go to the Etihad and return. Game week 6, though, however, is where the real prospects start. Leicester at home, Southampton at home, 90-minute man. when Saka's not on the pitch, he'll have penalties as well. And who knows, maybe Saka gets hooked at around 75, 80 to protect him because he's not as robust as Havertz. Havertz is ridiculously robust and available as a player. So, those penalties at the end of the game and just in general, he looks really sharp, right? And Arsenal are the second best side in the league. So, for all those reasons, I understand why I like him. Isak is someone I think we should be looking at for the chopping block. I mean, I'm not overly impressed with Newcastle. I do think that Tonali coming back will help him, but it's away against Fulham, and then it's not the easiest set of things. Manchester home, Everton away isn't bad, but if Branthwaite is there, then I think it becomes significantly harder. And then after that, it's just not a nice run. Brighton, Chelsea, Arsenal, and at that price, when Newcastle aren't firing on all cylinders, I do think when there's so many exit routes, it makes sense. Whether that be going really cheap and upgrading the midfield, or moving to the likes of Ollie Watkins. Now, we spoke about him previously. I think he's going to do fantastically well in the next 5 if his expected minutes are good. I think he'll outscore Havertz, and you know how bullish I am on Havertz. So if he is to be one that does get good expected minutes all over that, I do think you'll have to project it, however. How willing will Emery be to keep him on the pitch when he knows he's managing a few things? When John Duran's knocking on the door, will they play together, which makes Rodgers a worse asset, etc., right? So if you're willing to take the risk, the upside is there. However, the downside is also going to be there because if he gets hooked at 60, 65, you're paying 9 million for that type of player, 60, 65 minutes, and you can probably expect max 1 return in that time. So be cautious, but just to let you know that the upside is there. From the front to the back, I think we should talk about a theory that I introduced last time, and we're going to go into it in a bit more detail. So last preview, I spoke about how I think that the likelihood of clean sheets is going to significantly decrease in the Premier League, with more and more sides playing in the same way, playing in such a progressive, expansive way, with the lines higher, the increase in attacking talent in the league, and the superb quality of attacking talent in the league, and variables that align with those things. And as a result, I think that there needs to be a huge emphasis placed on which defenders provide you with attacking upside. Robinson is my favorite example. He has 0 clean sheets, 0. Trent has 3. Trent is a 7 million defender who is the best creative fullback to ever grace the game and has 3 clean sheets. And there's only 6 points difference, which is 1.5 a week, which is minuscule, especially when you consider the price. If anything, Robinson's been far better for the extra, or for the less 2.5 million. Why? Because he's got 2 assists. And the fact that even though Fulham aren't keeping clean sheets, he's still able to generate those attacking returns means that he's in and around the points always. And I think most people haven't had too many clean sheets apart from Arsenal and Liverpool. And even them, only the ones that have been generating attacking returns, like Gvardiol in the last game, have been rewarded because the bonus structure is one where it punishes you now for not getting those attacking returns. It's not like last year. You can't just accumulate loads of passes and get away with it. And there are not many Nottingham Forest-like teams that are going to set up in that below block. So again, you're just not going to get the same volume of clean sheets. And I think when looking at defenders, you must prioritize the fact that they can at least realistically get attacking returns. When I look at Gvardiol, the reason I picked him over Saliba was I identified the bonus system when it was released, and I knew this is the best header of the ball in the opposition box. Let me just buy him because he will get me goals, and when he gets me goals, he will also get me bonus. And Saliba's brilliant performances week on, week out that would have been rewarded more so last year, won't this year to anywhere close to the extent. Robinson, obviously flying down that flank, underlaps, overlaps, brilliant quality of crosses as well. Konsa, I actually think he's underrated in the air. So and Villa set pieces are good. So I think maybe I could get an attacking return there. But when I move any of these guys on, and I probably move 4, right? I will go to a player, unless they're dirt cheap, that I think can genuinely get attacking returns. Obviously, I'd like them to play for a good defensive side with good fixtures, but I'm willing to forego that slightly and significantly more than last year to allow for that attacking upside. Oro as an example. Do I expect Spurs to keep many clean sheets? No, probably not. But at least I know that I'm getting such a high volume of attacking actions. And I also think their defense is better than last year. So I'm really high on Poro as an example. And I really just wanted to maybe reinstate that in your mind because this is the way I think the game's going. And I think if you just prioritize defenders that are looking like they're getting clean sheets, it's not going to be enough. Because there will be times that you can see stupid goals. Manchester. Okay? And going for A Gvardiol of old might not work, but going for a Gvardiol of new, well, that might work. Now, many people are considering selling him, and I have not seen too many good things being said about this man in the fantasy football community. However, I am here to offer you a different perspective. I really, really, really like this as an option from game week 6. Not even 7, but game week 6. I think that what's going to happen is Rico Lewis it's not sustainable to play him game in, game out. And when he doesn't play, I expect Walker to go to right centre back. I mean, who else is really going to play there, right? And thus, I think the fullback you'll have in those pockets will be Gvardiol. And we've seen his level of ball striking. We've seen his carrying ability. We've seen his quality in small spaces. He is capable of generating attacking returns. Fixture on from game week 7 is fantastic. When Rico Lewis plays, okay, he plays left centre back. I know he got benched, but I don't think that'll be a regular occurrence. I actually think it was good that he just got his benching out of the way, and Pep saw what happened without him. So even when he doesn't play as the attacking fullback, okay, at least I have a defender who isn't stupidly expensive that can generate clean sheets at a realistic, good rate. And when Rico Lewis doesn't play, then I get the upside. Magnificent. And I don't see Rico Lewis playing every game because I know that Gvardiol can offer so much going forward as well. That he doesn't just need to employ Rico Lewis to do that job because Gvardiol can do it and do it very well, albeit somewhat differently, right? Like you're not going to see Gvardiol pop in the pockets as much, but maybe just like hitting those channels a bit more, almost like it's rugby, and leveraging his skill set in that way. And Walker obviously has so many tremendous qualities that have allowed him to maintain his career. Now, I'm not his biggest fan, but against very quick left wingers, he's always a good option, aka Newcastle game week 6. Hence why I think Gvardiol might play in that more attacking role in game week 12 and game week 13. And then from 7 to 11, you just get good fixtures. I really do think that this is something you should consider. If you are an owner, I wouldn't be selling. Sure, game week 5 is not ideal, but from then on, I think there's going to be upside that many people won't even realize until it's too late. They won't have a route to him either, and this is a magnificent differential to potentially have. Now, the final thing to discuss is the future. A lot of you will be wildcarding game week 6. Now, whilst I fundamentally disagree with that, I'm going to try and help you. I'm also going to try and talk you out of it to an extent, but I am going to try and help you with it. Okay, the first thing, and it's only come to my attention very, very recently. On wildcard 6, or just in general in game week 6, could you not have Haaland and Saka and Salah? So I look at my team, and I take my team as an example, and if you remember it, or you'll see it at the end of the video, I can go Isak to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and then go Emil Smith-Rowe to Mohamed Salah, which would give me only 2 enablers in the form of DCL and Rodgers, both of whom are great for minutes, great for fixtures, and playing in really good positions anyway. I also have Eze, which is what a brilliant asset in terms of fundamentals. And then my others will be made up of Havertz, again, what a brilliant asset and expensive. And I'll still have Saka, Salah, and Haaland. And not only that, my defense, as you can see, it's not a bad state. Like I still have 4 active defenders, and one of them is a 6 million, right? So that's the type of squad you could realistically have. And you don't need to necessarily go without Salah, right? You can have Salah and Saka. It doesn't have to be either or. Wolves away game week 6. Okay, good prospects there. Palace away game week 7. Good prospects there. And it's not like you're just dealing with a guy who needs fixtures. You're dealing with the best right winger in the world, the best right winger this league has ever seen. So I would consider at least a route where you could potentially have all 3. Because the upside to that, when I'd say not an abundance of assets are doing too well, everyone's going at kind of a mediocre level. When Salah and Haaland are going punch for punch at such a brilliant, brilliant level, I would just be careful of going without either now, especially because now is going to be a bit of a differential. And that's probably one of the reasons I like it. I didn't expect Salah to do this well. And I don't think it was the best option to go for him in game week 1. Whether I'm right or wrong, and you can argue about that, and there's definitely 2 perspectives on that. However, now, at least having a player of that quality as a differential for game week 6 and 7, I think could be really, really, really nice, on top of the fact of the captaincy in game week 5. Bryan Mbeumo looks good. He looks great. I have nothing bad to say about him. The only thing is maybe with Vista out the side, he becomes a bit worse. Maybe he becomes a lot worse. And that's something we're going to assess in Game Week 5. All I'm saying is I've seen a lot of teams, mine included, but a lot of teams genuinely, and maybe have a slightly difficult route to Mbeumo when they're not on wildcard 6, but can get him in Game Week 7. And I think, you don't need to break your team for Bryan Mbeumo 1 week. There's so many good midfield options anyway. West Ham, I don't particularly rate their defense. So I'm actually not going to say that Mbeumo couldn't do well because I expect him to do so. But it's not the end of the world, right? Especially when no one's going to pretty much captain him. So I think if you want to wait a week, it's fine. And especially if you have the likes of Eze and he's doing well, just let it ride out. Now we will come to the wildcard. I'm seeing a lot of teams wildcard that I don't think need to. Okay, fine. Let's say you get to double Arsenal in game week 6 and you miss out on Mbeumo and you get Mbeumo next week and you just have double Arsenal for the 2 good fixtures. And it really is just 2 good fixtures. Bournemouth away is not great and then it's Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea, right? Is it the end of the world? No. Is it warranting of a wildcard? No. Because a lot of teams anyway are going double Arsenal and Saka or Havertz. Well, okay. Saliba isn't the most likely goal scorer, although I actually really rate his attacking prospects. And it's not guaranteed that they get a clean sheet. Even if they do, he probably won't be in the bonus. Okay, 6 points. So what? Maybe your defenders could do something, get 1 attack in return. Maybe Trent could get a haul. You don't need to sell these players just for like a couple of good fixtures. You can just use free transfers to get 1 or 2 in. And if you don't have a triple up, it's not the end of the world. I think down the line, people are really going to suffer as a result of not having either store transfers or a wildcard. When the schedule becomes intensified, there's more injuries, there's bigger fixture swings. And I just think take a patient approach with your team to an extent. A very logical, cold-blooded approach. If you're behind, it doesn't matter. We're so early on. Things can change in literally a week, and you can go from 1 million to 100k just like that. Just consider the fact that you don't need to have every single shiny toy every week, and Wildcard 6 isn't as important as being made out for it to be. Like I said, I really don't like it, but even toning that down, I still think that there's a lot of sense just to avoiding it, even for some of the teams that it appears look like they need it. You don't have to have the most optimal team for Game Week 6, and it's not the end of the world. There's 12 weeks after that you have to go without a wildcard, and you're probably not even playing your wildcard in 19, right? What if you play in 33 like last week? Okay, now you have 27 weeks to go. So I would say just at least approach it in a different way, or at least just consider it. If you just consider it, I'll be more than happy. Obviously, there'll be spots where it's the best thing for your team. Obviously, you will have planned for this. Obviously, there will be situations where you've got off to a tremendous start and you're looking to add to the upside. Fantastic. And for that, I applaud you. But this is more for the people who are in slightly more peculiar and awkward spots. Right. To finish off, who needs to find their way to the chopping block and who's going to be the talk of the town? Now, when I say the talk of the town, that's mainly, again, relating to wildcard 6, because I do think, say you wildcard in 6, right? There's going to be someone who comes along in 7, 8, 9, 10. We're still very early on. Trends need to develop. And when they do, you'll want them. And maybe you won't have the easiest route because of the wildcard that you're going to select, or the fact that you just need a wildcard to get to them anyway because the structures of teams will really change. But we've talked about wildcard 6 enough. Who needs to find their way to the chopping block? This is for the likes of Diogo Jota, who I think could be benched against Bournemouth. I think Nunes is a good stylistic fit, as I spoke about earlier. And as a result, players like that whose expected minutes in general haven't been magnificent, and I don't expect them to be magnificent as the schedule intensifies, I think could find their way out the team, especially because at that price point, he blocks quite a bit. The likes of Mbeumo. Gordon to a lesser extent now, but you know what I mean. And who else? Well, now, do you need a Liverpool defensive double up? Can you not just go with one of Trent or Robbo? Something like that. Isak, he's not playing too well. Can you get rid of him? And I would just say that for the more expensive players in your team, really do look if you could just use them as routes to the Arsenal assets as opposed to just wildcarding. But that's all that I had to say really about going forward. I think it's massively important you plan. It's something that I've made myself do more this season because I wasn't happy with certain things that I did last year, and I've profited off it, and I'm sure you will do as well if you just take the time. So that's why this section was slightly passionate, and I spent a bit of time on it. Now, I realized I might have rambled a little bit there, so for that, I apologize. I hope you can see that my passion is only there just to try and help you and nothing else. I would just like you to consider it. That's all. I'm not super against wildcard 6. I don't love the strategy. All I want you to do is at least consider a different route. But that is all, and we won't have any more conversation about that because that is all she wrote for today. If you could consider subscribing as we push to 3,000, I would be greatly appreciative of that. If you could like the video, should you have taken any value from it, I'll be greatly appreciative of that. And that, like I said, is all she wrote for today. I shall see you tomorrow for the Game Week 5 team selection. And until then, have a wonderful, wonderful day. And make sure to make it a good day.